The Freeman Report on today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Right, okay, I'm delighted to be welcoming my next guest, Geoff Bikes Cars. I have listened to him a few times on Locked and Loaded with Rick Munn, so I'm delighted that he's now joining me on the Freeman Report. Hello, Geoff, how are you doing?
Good morning, afternoon, how are you?
I'm very, very good. Right, Geoff, I'm really keen to hear what you think of this big, well, in my view, it's a big bugger's muddle waiting to happen, this whole EV market. The government, of course, has mandated that by 2030, 80% of new car sales and 70% of new van sales have got to be zero emissions. And at the moment, EVs are really the only kind of technology on the mass market. All of that, well, consumers are showing that they're not really interested in them, and the infrastructure isn't there. Even the electricity grid, if everybody got an EV tomorrow, the whole thing would collapse. So, Geoff, what do you think is going to happen? Because it looks like a mess waiting to happen to me.
I think what's going to happen is the vehicle manufacturers are going to end up pushing back against this. And we've already seen this a little bit so far. So the German manufacturers are realizing that the big EV push was really just a ticket to nowhere. And I think the only thing that the sort of inevitable final destination for this is that we go back to where we were, which is the car manufacturers. They're desperately now trying to claw back some of the investments that they've made in these EVs that, as you say, are not selling. We're not finding private buyers for these EVs, even if they are selling to fleets. It's the private buyers that we need in order to drive the demand for these EVs. And the fact that there's no demand in the second-hand market, as we've discussed before, it just means that the residuals are terrible. So the values drop through the floor, and that just sort of perpetuates the whole thing. So we've got this situation where nobody really wants these cars unless you're forced to have one as a company car. So the manufacturers are kind of left there, footing the bill.
Yeah, now there are some people, and I'm quite attracted to this argument that actually this the big plan going forward is nobody's going to have any cars anymore. And actually what we will have is self-driving cars, which people can just hire. You just get an app and you can call one up. They'll be sat locally. A lot of people are suspicious that is the real aim in terms of what governments and where they want us to go. And this whole EV thing is just a big distraction. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's a drum that I've been banging for a long time on my YouTube channel, trying to get people to understand that the goal was never to get you out of your car and into an EV. The goal was quite simply just to get you out of your car. As you said in the intro there isn't enough infrastructure to move if you could click your fingers right now and say, right, everybody that owns a petrol or a diesel car, let's just click our fingers and turn them into electric. It doesn't work. The grid collapses.
Yeah.
It flat out doesn't work. So the goal was never to move everybody across to electric cars. It was just to get you out of your car and stop you going places. And again, you can be called a conspiracy theorist for saying, oh, there's a nefarious plan to stop us going places. And you say, well, look at what's happening with everything else. You've got the low emission zones now that you're not allowed to drive in if you're in a car of a certain age. We've got low traffic neighborhoods going on in the UK, which is essentially someone just sticking some bollards up at the end of a road and deciding that cars aren't allowed to go down there anymore. Then you've got the German transport minister who just came under fire for saying that he might propose to ban driving on the weekends. And all of these things are sort of, the little news stories are starting to come together. And the guys that were initially thought of as conspiracy theorists, people are now starting to go, hang on a minute, maybe that nutter from YouTube was actually onto something.
I wouldn't go as far as to call you a nutter, Geoff, but what do you think about, because look, I've thought about this quite a lot. If we could have cars that did self-drive, that you could literally just have an app, there would be local sort of depots where they would just sit locally. And so you could literally get your app out, within, say, 2, 3, 4 minutes, a car would turn up and it would take you wherever you wanted to go. The costs could be a lot lower than owning a car because you don't have to MOT it. You've got economies of scale, all of these things. And of course, unlike taxi drivers, you don't need a person to drive it. So from that, when you think about that, it actually looks quite attractive, not having to bother about taking your car to the garage to get it fixed and all these things. I think for me, though, the problem I have is the control aspect. Is, you know, the government suddenly own or can control access to vehicles. What are your thoughts? I mean, do you think that this could work if it was done correctly?
Well, hang on. Let me just put my new hat on. Okay, I'm going to put my hat on that says I am now a government minister. All right, and I think it's a brilliant idea, because what that means is when someone picks up their phone to summon their car to take them somewhere, the phone would go, well, hang on a minute. Are you actually a dissident? Are you someone that the government doesn't like? Are you trying to go outside of your 15-minute zone? Are you trying to meet up with someone who is also a dissident? And then they've got the complete control to prevent you from going anywhere at all.
Yeah.
So as much as the idea will be sold to the youngsters that we've got to reach with all of this, the idea will be sold to the youngsters that they can book it on their phone like they do an Uber, and they won't have to pay for car insurance, and they won't have to pay for road tax and all this sort of stuff. They won't realize the freedoms that they've handed away by not standing up and defending our right to jump in a petrol or diesel car, fill it full of petrol as you want without telling everybody. So yeah, it's the control aspect that worries me.
Yeah, and of course, you know, we've got the train system at the moment, and we've you know, in the UK here, we've got one of the most expensive train networks in Europe. So I'm sure what will actually happen as well is consumers will just be ripped off. It's a real shame, isn't it, Geoff? Because we've got these new technologies coming through. I mean, the other big one, I guess, is digital money. I think actually that could be revolutionary in so many ways to have that. But again, it comes down to government. It seems that although government is kind of trying to push and say that we need to do these things for green reasons, for environmental reasons, and there are some good arguments for all of this, for that, it seems to be the reason people like you and me that are more clued up push back against it is because actually we just don't trust governments. That's the problem with all of these things, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's basically it. I think you've nailed it. We don't trust them as far as we could throw them.
Yes.
We've seen the way governments have behaved over the last 4 years, you know, whether it's Canada or New Zealand or Australia or the UK. We've seen how they have behaved with controlling people. We've seen how they've behaved with spending money, lies. I mean, you name it, and it's been done either by the government or to us by the government. And why would we want the government then to have complete control over a national digital currency? It's extremely scary, especially as, you know, we just discussed the concept of, well, I'm going to try and book a car to go outside of my 15-minute zone, and then my phone is going to flag up and say, no, you're not allowed to do that because we've got you on a list as a government detractor. And then it's the same when you're going to try spend some money. It's going to say, you know, your current amount of money is timed out because you said something on social media last week, so you've got to wait 3 days to spend any more of your digital money. The problem is, and this is where I have major issues, we're sort of standing on a precipice now where the world is starting to look like every dystopian novel and movie we've ever seen. And the task that seems so difficult, all the things that we've been saying, we've seen them in movies and books, and they weren't good in those movies and books. So trying to get people to realize that digital ID and digital cars and digital tracking and digital cameras and facial recognition, all this sort of stuff, we've seen it in Minority Report and 1984 and The Matrix, and every movie that we've seen about dystopia, we seem to be moving that direction, and yet we can't manage to get the normal people to realize that these are not good things.
Yeah, it's such a shame because I think, you know, in digital money, we know what the answer is to get over our distrust of governments, and that's decentralization, so that we take middlemen and governments out of the equation. We don't actually need them to do transactions. That technology exists. You know, I think it's such a shame, really, because you know, I think I could get over the fact that, you know, I might like a blue car or a faster car or a car with leather interior. I could get over all of that if it was really, really cheap, really, really convenient, and you know, I didn't have to worry about MOTs and all of that and insurance and all that anymore. I could be persuaded. As long as I can still have a motorbike for the weekends, as long as I can still do that, I could go with it. But I'm going to push back like you because I just do not trust the governments. Geoff, let's also talk about new technologies in cars in general, because I was looking at some stats this morning in the US, and I think Honda have got 6.3 million recalls in the US market. Ford have got 6.1, and very, very similar numbers for other manufacturers. What's going on? Is this just car companies trying to pack cars with loads of new technology, which, to be frank, I don't know a lot. Well, I know about myself. I bought a 10-year-old BMW that's got buttons, hasn't got a screen on it, because I don't want all of that. It's just more things to go wrong. It's confusing, and I want a car that drives me from A to B. I don't want lots of new technology. What's going on?
I think you sort of nailed it there. I mean, for me and for my YouTube channel, my perfect era of cars is, let's say, mid 90s to early 2000s. That is the point when cars have got everything that they need on them. They're comfortable, they're reliable, they're well built, and they're safe. But then after 2005-06, I think the manufacturers realized that they'd reached peak car. Like they'd got to a point where they built the perfect car. You know, it will last for 250,000 miles without any like major surgery. It's safe, it's good looking, you can drive it every day. And after that, they go, well, how on earth are we going to sell anyone a new car if we've already built the best thing ever? And the answer is more technology. So we get more driver assistance that really those of us that enjoy driving never wanted in the first place. We've got more software. Everything then goes from, you know, all of your buttons. Suddenly everything is on a touch screen. You've got a touch screen for your sat nav. You've got a touch screen for your climate control. You've got a touch screen for all your different driver settings. And I think the other side is cutting costs. So when you combine extra technology that nobody needs, that is extremely complex, with companies that want to cut costs and want to buy their products that are going into their cars from whoever is putting in the lowest bid, you've got a recipe for all these recalls. And I think I saw the same article that you did. There's been a few articles recently about just how many cars these big manufacturers have got under recall at the moment. And the big one is the airbag company. It was something like 67 million recalled due to airbags. It's wild.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. And of course, you know, this whole thing about sort of not owning stuff and renting stuff. I think it's BMW that we've seen recently, isn't it? That what is it? If you want you buy your BMW, it comes with seat warmers. But if you want to turn those seat warmers on, you have to subscribe. I mean, I think, am I correct? That was BMW, wasn't it?
I think BMW were the first people. I think they were the first to come out with a sort of press release saying that they were gonna offer those services. But I did receive an email from someone the other day about Mercedes-Benz saying a very similar thing, that if they didn't carry on paying the subscription, then they were going to lose things like the central locking and stuff like that. And again, you start thinking, well, what's going to happen to these? Let's say you've got a huge car manufacturer who's been making cars and then they go bust. Well, if they're no longer supporting the software, and if your manufacturer has gone bump, so you can't get your software update, then how can you guarantee the safety of your car if it's not running the latest software system? So then you're completely beholden to the manufacturer for everything. It's not like in the old days where you just buy a car, you leave the dealer, and you don't actually have to see the dealer again. You know, we are now looking at subscription services, and people are buying cars in a totally different way.
I don't think he'll catch on, to be honest with you. I really don't, because I think, well, for me, it offends me to think that I can buy something. I mean, my phone quite often does that. I've paid a lot of money for that. I don't pay it off monthly, and it really annoys me that they insist on doing certain things to it and changing it. And I'm like, no, this is mine. I own it. Hands off. Right, but we've got about a minute left to go, Geoff. I did see that you posted on the weather in Dubai. What do you make of what's going on there?
Someone's cocked something up, haven't they, with the weather in Dubai? They've over-egged it. They've held the finger on the button for slightly too long, and they've played their cards when they didn't mean to. But I'm just a conspiracy theorist. But I mean, geoengineering and weather manipulation, you can read the patents. It's been around for a very, very long time, and I think someone's overdone it in Dubai. I think it's as simple as that.
Really, really interesting, because I've seen videos that are put out by the government there admitting that they do it. So I'm wondering, given the scenes we've seen with all of those vehicles underwater, whether anybody's actually going to take the Dubai government to court. I don't know. But seems a bit dodgy, doesn't it, to be doing that? They millions of pounds worth of, or maybe even billions, I don't know. Geoff, you've been absolutely fantastic. Please do come back on the Freeman Report for me. Quickly before you go, where do people go to subscribe to you on YouTube?
Type in Geoff Buys Cars on YouTube and you'll find me. I also got TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and Twitter as well. Anywhere, basically, you'll find me on the net.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Geoff Buys Cars. Thank you, Geoff.